Stallone was the target of the host's desire to humiliate him. Rather, he became a paragon of the reason why the public has lost faith in the media. Even those who weren't anxious about the performance perspired under the intensely bright studio lights. In contrast, Sylvester Stallone remained calm. He waited on the chair with his legs spread and his shoulders relaxed. As the show began, the crowd mumbled their expectations, and some even clenched their phones, eager to capture every moment. They sensed that an event was imminent. A well-groomed television host named Ethan Caldwell sat across from him. He leaned forward, a smug smile spreading across his face, known for his progressive tilt and enjoyment of gotcha moments. In his interviews with prominent figures from Hollywood, politics, and activism, he consistently managed to make them fumble. However, Stallone, that was uncharted ground. Mr. Stallone, Ethan began, his voice being composed and practiced. You've always been a symbol of American toughness, but do you think that kind of masculinity is outdated? I mean, in today's world, don't you think we should redefine strength to be more inclusive? Some people in the crowd laughed. Fans of Ethan's, the ones who thought he would use his visitors' own words to trap them, nodded in accord. With a slow and deliberate blink, Stallone blinked. Then, with his knees bent and elbows resting on him, he took a deep breath in via his nose. Do I think being tough is a bad thing now? Then I think grinned. Well, I think we're past the era where men need to punch their way through problems. Don't you think the world has moved on from that kind of outdated thinking? Absolute quiet. It kind of keeps folks on the edge of their seats for quite some time. Still cracking his chin, Stallone continued. After that, he burst out laughing, and I don't mean a mild giggle. Are you kidding me? He inquired towards the end. You think toughness is a problem? The tie of Ethan was straightened. I think it can be toxic when it discourages vulnerability, yes. As if he were taking everything in. Stallone nodded slowly. After that, he stretched out his arms across the chair's back and leaned back. Letting me ask you something. It whispered in a thoughtful tone. If someone broke into your house tonight, you want a tough guy in there, or do you want someone who's going to sit down and talk about their feelings? And a handful of gas and a few dispersed claps escaped the spectators. As soon as Ethan loosened his jaw, Stallone continued, see, toughness ain't about punching walls or yelling the loudest. It's about standing your ground when life knocks you down. It's about protecting your family. It's about discipline, respect, and hard work. And if you think the world doesn't need that anymore, he shook his head, then I don't know what world you're living in, man. Ethan feigned amusement, however. A trace of apprehension flickered behind his eyes. He was unprepared for Stallone to retaliate with such speed. However, he was not one to surrender so readily. All right, Ethan responded, adjusting his position. But don't you think Hollywood and, let's be honest, your own movies have glorified violence as the only solution to problems? No hesitation on Stallone's part. Hollywood glorifies a lot of things. You ever seen a movie where a guy saves the world by filling out paperwork? The sound of laughter, at last, genuine mirth. Some of Ethan's crew colleagues couldn't help but grin. Still, Ethan hadn't finished. Additional aces were still in his sleeve. Stallone, on the other hand, was only warming up. With an air of precision, Ethan straightened his back and fiddled with the cue card stack on his lap, perhaps trying to find the ideal counterpunch. He had mastery over the tempo, guiding his guests in a way that would cause them to trip and fall. However, Stallone was not cooperating. Sure, how about we discuss influence? Ethan asked as he flipped through his notes. Do you ever consider the message that conveys when you play tough, no-nonsense characters? These men who solve problems with guns, fists, or sheer force, it's a bit of a trademark of yours. Do you not feel obligated to advocate for a hero who is, should we say, more progressive? And that was the way he stressed progressive just enough to hint at the direction the piece was taking that gave Stallone a grin, like a boxer warming up for a fight. He straightened up and stretched his shoulders. He maintained a steady tone, as Stallone said. First of all, I make movies. Movies aren't real, you know that, right? He then arched an eyebrow. I mean, the last time I checked, I never actually went 15 rounds with Apollo Creed. Never took down a whole army with a red bandana and a knife. Never ran up those steps in Philly and single-handedly fixed people's problems. While some in the audience chuckled, Ethan maintained his composure. Sure, but movie shape culture. Kids grow up watching Rambo and Rocky. Don't you think we should be giving them heroes who solve problems without violence? Stallone blew his nose to let out a breath. He shook his head and asked, man, have you ever seen Rocky? That whole movie was about getting back up when life knocks you down. It wasn't about beating people up. It was about heart perseverance. And Rambo, he sounded dismissive. All he wanted was some space, man. Nothing would have transpired if he had been allowed to go around town and be alone. This time the applause was a bit louder from the crowd and not formed in Ethan's jaw. Nothing was going according to plan, and he knew it. So he drew nearer, his voice lower and more intimate. All right, very well, he responded. But let's get down to brass tacks. Let's discuss the current state of affairs in the United States. Many are beginning to doubt the very essence of manhood and toughness. Some may even contend that your brand of toughness, the traditional don't show weakness kind, contributes to the problem as it sows discord rather than unity. How do you respond to that? Stallone gazed intently at Ethan as he drummed his fingers on the armrest, leaving the question hanging in the air. Lose contact with firefighters ever? His question was straightforward. Ethan scowled and said, "Pardon me?" "A brave fireman. An officer, a man serving in the military to put food on the table. Even a single mother has to work 2 jobs. Ever had a conversation with those folks? So you're saying that they ought to be tougher?" Stallone firmly rejected the idea. "No, dude, the world continues to function because of their resilience. Hardness isn't the issue. The issue is that many view strength negatively as if it were harmful. My friend, weakness is not a virtue. Power combined with mastery is what ensures the safety of individuals." A man's low whistle echoed through the room, changing the vibe and making Ethan feel like he was losing control. But what about Stallone abruptly raised a hand to interrupt, not in an aggressive manner, but just enough to signal that he was not yet through. "Do you wish to understand the core issue? Toughness, isn't it?" Stallone leaned forward. "The ones who bring up the topic of toughness are living in a world constructed and guarded by resilient individuals. It feels like an adversary. Sitting here in your sharp suit, you attempt to tell me what's out of date by asking predetermined questions. Allow me to share something with you, dude. You will be eternally grateful that there are men like me in the world in the event that everything truly goes wrong." He closed her. Ethan choked. He was about to ask another question in an effort to reclaim control, but the audience's attention had switched from nodding along with him to anticipating Stallone's next move. Stallone, meanwhile, showed no signs of slowing down. Stallone wasn't stumbling, tripping over his words, or getting defensive. He was owning the room, and Ethan could feel the energy slipping from his grasp. Things weren't going according to plan. At this point, they were doing more than simply listening. They were actively supporting him. "Hey, I hear you. I do," Ethan responded in a measured voice, "but let's be honest." He made an effort to restore control while simultaneously forcing a smile. "Refusing to change is not the same as being strong. He would argue that our society is lagging behind because of people like you who have an antiquated way of thinking. Isn't it time to put this behind us?" Rather than returning with another joke or a cutting one-liner, Stallone's tone changed, becoming serene and almost reflective as he slowly exhaled, maintaining a steady look. "Has the destruction of a structure ever occurred to you?" His question was straightforward. He blinked and asked, "What?" "A wrecking ball." "Do you ever catch a film?" Without committing, the host said, "Yeah, I suppose." Stallone gave a subtle nod. It just takes a few seconds to lower. It disappears with the push of a button. And a few charges. He clenched his fists and said, "But have you ever seen one being constructed?" Ethan remained silent. "That takes years," Stallone continued, "brick by brick, one steel at a time, men laboring tirelessly, ensuring the foundation can support the weight day and night. Those in possession of explosives, however, couldn't care less about that. They disregard the blood, sweat, and tears of the people who put their lives on the line to make it. Their only desire is to witness its collapse." There was complete stillness throughout the crowd. According to Stallone, you say moving forward. But he asked, but moving where? Moving ahead isn't necessarily the best course of action. In their haste to adapt, some people fail to consider the consequences of their actions. He failed to consider whether the item they are destroying could be valuable in the long run. The gravity of the situation hit Ethan so hard that he licked his lips. He had anticipated a gullible star who would crumble under scrutiny, a man amenable to being stereotyped, before he entered this interview, but he was wrong. Stallone was proving it. Even worse, the crowd was aware of it. With an effort to suppress a laugh, Ethan responded, "Okay, that's a fascinating point of view. Society has evolved, though, so let's be honest. The universe in which you created Rocky is no longer our reality. I see a heightened level of consciousness has emerged. We're asking tough questions regarding gender norms and structural problems. Considerate thinking." Stallone raised an eyebrow and cut in. "Or are you simply criticizing?" Oh, a few in the audience let out applause, while others let out gasps, and even Ethan's own camera team looked at each other. No longer was this merely an interview. There was fighting here. Ethan attempted to collect himself by raising his hands in the air. All right, he murmured above the din. "So my question to you is, why do you believe there are so many individuals who resist toughness and strength if they are so important? Why is it that many people think it's old-fashioned?" Stallone paused, but was here for a moment to allow the question to linger before he leaned in, his voice now softer and almost conspiratorial. "Because weak people don't like being reminded they're weak." An outburst of applause erupted from some in the audience, while others remained motionless in shock. Nothing escaped Ethan's lips when he opened them to speak. After waiting for the response to fade, Stallone took a seat. To clarify, he did not claim that everyone should lead a heroic life. Whatever you choose to call it, life is going to throw you curveballs. And it happens, nobody will give a hoot about how you feel. Its only question is, can you withstand the blow and keep going? Nothing. Neither a joke nor a response, just quiet from Ethan. Something much more significant, though, was transpiring outside of that studio. Everything shifted the second that moment made it online. Ethan fought tooth and nail to maintain his businesslike smile as the interview came to a close. However, Stallone did little more than stand up and extend his shoulders. Backstage, producers scurried, and Ethan's earpiece hummed with panicked voices as he casually waved to the crowd before walking off the scene as if nothing had transpired. That did not go as planned. Social media is already picking it up. Cut the controversial parts before we post it online. Unfortunately, by the time they realized it, someone in the live crowd had already uploaded video, and the internet had gone wild. Slam's TV host with a slap on the back. Live debate features Sylvester Stallone's devastating attack against woke media. We must continue to seek out authentic individuals such as Stallone. Within hours, the tape was trending and the comments became a battleground as the video traveled like wildfire from Twitter to Facebook to YouTube. People clipped the best moments, overlaying reaction memes, slow motion replays, and even dramatic background music. This was fantastic, and I usually don't enjoy Stallone's films. Everyone has been thinking it, but no one has dared to speak it until he did. When Stallone flipped the script, the host had absolutely nothing. Timeless classic. Naturally, the reaction was swift. Just another elderly famous person mired in his past. This is the epitome of toxic masculinity. Let's stop treating him like an intellectual already. Damage control was a top priority for Ethan's network. They issued a carefully worded statement highlighting the need for diverse viewpoints and fostering constructive dialogue. Taking to Twitter himself, Ethan posted, "Healthy debate is important. I respect everyone's views, even if I don't agree. Let's keep the conversation civil." Yet nobody gave a hoot. The outcome had already been determined by the internet. And Stallone, he failed to make any posts whatsoever. Twitter was not used. Unconcerned, he proceeded about his day without making any remarks to the press. Unlike the comment section trolls, he lacked evidence to back up his claims. However, once everything cooled down, a far more significant inquiry began to circulate. Had we witnessed a mere viral moment? Alternately, had Stallone revealed a more fundamental aspect of contemporary media? The footage persisted even after days had passed. You could find it on morning shows, podcasts, and even news segments that analyzed its significance. Many thought it was a wake-up call. Some said it was an orchestrated dispute. But it was obvious of one thing. Not everyone was mentioning Stallone. Something greater was being spoken between them. Some thought Stallone had shown the hypocrisy of contemporary television, including how hosts like Ethan enjoy pushing a message yet back down when confronted with opposition. They expect celebrities to just nod along, but the moment someone thinks for themselves, they freak out. Critics, however, said that Stallone was no different from any other wealthy actor who stubbornly refused to let go of his old ways of thinking. As the saying goes, it's easy to preach toughness when you're living in a mansion. However, an intriguing coincidence took place. People who understood what it meant to be tough in the real world began to speak up. This included firefighters, police officers, veterans, manufacturing workers, construction crews, single mothers, and others. A post made by a former Marine went viral on Facebook. Stallone gets it. Strength isn't about being a bully. It's about standing up when life knocks you down. We need more of that. An Oklahoma mother posted a video online. "I raised 3 boys on my own. If I hadn't been tough, they wouldn't have eaten. Don't tell me strength is a bad thing." An elderly man's serene video at a gas station also got popular. With a disapproving shake of his head, he watched the interview on his phone. These kids, don't know what real struggle is. Think life's about debating nonsense on TV. Stallone, he understands real life. At the same time, Ethan stopped talking. There was no change in focus, despite the network's best efforts to redirect viewers to other stories. Repetition of the same query greeted each effort to proceed. Why did a Hollywood actor have more common sense than a professional journalist? After that, the substantive discussion started, aside from Stallone, ignoring the interview. Nonetheless, regarding the broader view. Had contemporary culture truly become that fragile? Did individuals wish to pretend it wasn't essential because they were terrified of showing their true strength? Would you say the media shaped culture merely controlled it? These were more than just points of contention that had gone viral. Their subject matter was the dining table. Not only were people observing, but they were also becoming alert. Finally, Stallone, he had continued to remain silent. Stallone waited a week before speaking, not by means of a news release. Nowhere on the internet It took place in a modest San Diego, California gym during an informal interview. In what seemed like an attempt at damage control, a local journalist wanted to know his thoughts on the viral event. Stallone instead shrugged, drank from his water bottle, and wiped perspiration from his forehead. Look, man, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just being honest. Someone from the news team was really insistent. But did you expect the reaction to be this huge? This made Stallone laugh. I've been around for a while. It's funny how people always act surprised when you tell the truth. That's just the way life is these days. His response was more powerful than any words he could have said. Not much to say. Ich stay on your horse, just an ordinary guy who spoke his mind and got on with his life. Yet, what is the true effect? That was far from over. A decline in viewers occurred on Ethan Caldwell's show. He was subtly moved away from high-profile interviews and into other segments by his network. He was still a rising star, but he wasn't the same. At the same time, an unforeseen event began to unfold nearby. A new appreciation for Stallone's work led many to revisit his earlier interviews, speeches, and films. Rocky Balboa's iconic monologue was rediscovered in a clip. It isn't about how hard you hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. Outside of the virtual sphere, something changed when people began utilizing it in conversations regarding perseverance, strength, and genuine resilience. A slew of young men began showing up to boxing facilities and giving it their all. Instead of teaching their children entitlement, parents discussed the importance of discipline. Employees started to stand higher and more determined to overcome obstacles rather than wallow in self-pity. It wasn't because Stallone instructed them to rather. It was because they saw the difference between authentic strength and stage frailty. Finally, this had nothing to do with a single interview. It had nothing to do with Stallone versus Ethan Caldwell. The story revolved around a society that had lost touch with the true meaning of resilience. They were reminded by one individual. Consider this. What kind of resilience do you hold in high regard, given that you have come this far? Is it the kind that disappears the second someone questions it, or the type that remains steadfast in critical situations? Since the using being the physical strength isn't necessarily indicative of toughness, being yourself while no one is looking is the key. Is it to your liking? Sign up now to read more thought-provoking stories. Truths are important even in a chaotic society.